Welcome back to Symposium of Wild Hearts. I am your guide and super curious human, Aisha Ophelia, and today I'm here with Angela Ruiz, who is coming to us from Amsterdam. I can kind of see it like peeking out the back side of you, but she has a deep, rich history with plant medicine starting back in Mexico. She's worked with a lot of nonprofits and startups doing business development, and she has a passion for plant medicine and psychedelics and how it links to mental health. So welcome, Angela.
Thank you. I'm excited to have this conversation.
Nice. I'm so happy that you're here. I was really looking forward to this conversation. One thing I'm doing to begin all of these little sessions is just doing some a heart-centering pause. And so if you'd like to, you can flutter your eyes closed. And for those who are listening or watching, please feel free to do the same or just follow along to the best of your ability. So we're just going to take a moment and see what's up for us inside. So just taking a deep breath and sigh it out if you like. I like doing that because it's just a sign to the nervous system that all is well. A deep breath would even work. And what we're doing in this space is just cultivating curiosity about what's there. And if you'd like, you can even place your hand on your heart. Maybe your heart's beating. Maybe there's an ache or a pain. Maybe you're tapping into something that's uncomfortable. But what I'd challenge you to do is just view it through the eyes of a loving mother for a child. Just taking the time to listen and be curious and to arrive. We hustle and bustle so many places. Sometimes it's nice just to take a deep breath and be like, okay. So if you need more space or you need more time in this space, feel free to pause this and just spend some more time with your breath. Maybe sigh it out some more, whatever you intuitively feel that you need. For the rest of us, when you're ready, just flutter your eyes back open and come back to this time and this space. That always helps me. I don't know about everybody else, but I like doing that, just taking that pause. So instead of reading your bio, I've been doing this kind of fun thing, and I totally stole it from Jimmy Fallon. He calls it Think Fast, but it's 11 questions. They're rapid fire. There's no wrong and right answer. So it's like, as soon as I'm asking the question, you're answering. So
Right,
yeah, it's just a way to like get the energy flowing. Get people introduced to you. So
okay.
Question 1, why is the sun so hot?
Oof. Why is the sun so hot?
First thing, whatever you think of. Doesn't even have to make sense.
Burning flames.
I like it. What are birds made of?
Wings and feathers.
What was Madonna's first word?
Nipples.
How old would Elvis be today?
87.
Who stole the eggs?
The chicken.
Why are you so relieved?
Because we just are here and that's it. We're just here as beings.
That's right. What's another word for wild?
Carefree.
What can I buy for $1?
An egg.
What's your favorite plant medicine?
Ayahuasca.
Tell me a secret.
A secret. Fun little secret. Let's see. I have one tattoo on my foot.
Nice.
Yeah.
How does your heart feel? This is the last question.
Very open.
Excellent. You get the prize of participation. Oh, there is no prize.
Good questions. Like
Exactly. So I would love to get started with a little bit about your story, which I know is you know, not only your story, but that you learned things from your grandmother. I'm picturing this very rich matriarchal line of medicine. I would love to know how you got introduced to the idea of plant medicine, and where that all started.
Yeah. So it actually, for me, it really started with two of my grandmothers. Um, One was my great grandmother, who is my mom's grandmother, my mom's dad's mother. She actually lived to be 106. She just passed away 6 years ago when I was 26.
Okay.
And so I got to spend a lot of time with her. But she was the town doctor, the medicine woman of the town in the mid 1900s and early 1900s of our hometown in Mexico.
Uh-huh.
And she learned from doctors that would come into the small town from surrounding cities about once a month, and they would give courses to a few people in the town, and she was one of them. And a lot of these courses were also natural herb medicines, plant medicines, and then she ended up growing a lot of it in her backyard and making medicines on her own. But I mean, she did everything from delivering babies to healing, you know, somebody with a tummy ache, or she did a lot of energy work, etc. And she just taught me a lot about love, being aware of energy, both in using your own energy and in listening to energy around you. She was very spiritual, extremely Catholic. And she had a lot of encounters with, I guess, what you would call the spirit world or the energy world. And she would often talk about it. And then the other inspiration is my grandmother, my dad's mom, and she's still alive. She's 92.
What was your grandmother's name?
Esther.
Okay.
Esther Magdalena.
Okay.
Yeah, I called her Abuelita Esther.
I love it. It's beautiful. I think we should say their names as much as possible. You know, I'm always curious about ancestors, and
wow, yeah.
What a deep well of wisdom and information, but I'll let you keep going.
So this is a picture of her.
Oh my goodness. I'm so glad you brought that. What a fierce woman. Wow.
Yeah.
That's
was
so cool.
I think early 20s in this picture, but
yeah. Beautiful.
And yeah, my dad's mom, my abuelita Rafaelita, I actually made a short doc of her telling her own story.
Ooh, we'll link to that. I definitely want to see that.
Yeah, absolutely. And she has some crazy stories. I mean, she's been involved in exorcisms with priests, with a whole mess of things.
Yeah.
Gave birth on her own twice, had 10 kids.
Girl, you come from a strong line of women. There's probably nothing you can't do. Come on.
But she is a huge inspiration to me as well. And she actually, for decades, would get together with a group of women every Monday night, and they would play around with herbs and with plant medicines. They would burn them, cook them, start making all different types of medicines. And then the ones that she made, she would sell. And then 100% of the profits she would give to the less fortunate people of the town. And she was actually approached several times by a couple different people that wanted to make her medicines into a business. And she actually refused all times that they came up and approached her. And for her, it was just always about giving back to the less fortunate instead of money. She just could care less about that. So I mean, those are two huge inspirations in my life. I don't know how far back that goes. That's as far back as I know it goes in my family history. And two women that I get to spend a lot of time with and got to spend a good amount of time with. And then the last cherry on top that really pushed me into the field in the last year was an ayahuasca experience that I had. And it just, it blew me away completely.
Good. And that was one of the questions. We'll get to kind of specifics and how that changed you and what that was about.
Yeah. But that was really the last cherry on top. And then in between that, there's obviously a whole mess of inspirations and influences throughout my life, but there is definitely this solid base with my own family being part, natural medicine healers and energy workers. And one of my cousins does it. My aunt is a Reiki master. Her daughter is a Reiki master. I mean, it's mixed around in our family.
Yeah, it sounds like it's been in your blood and in your bones forever. So it makes sense that this is your work in the world. And so for people that are watching who kind of understand, they have an understanding of herbs and plant medicine. Can you define for us what an entheogen is, and if you consider that to be a psychedelic, or what the difference is? How do you play with those two terms?
Yeah, so entheogen and psychedelics are actually the same thing. Entheo is actually derived from a Greek word that means God within, which is very, it's like a perfect matching for what a psychedelic is.
Yeah.
And then entheogen put together is something that generates God within. And that's exactly what psychedelics do. So it's really just it's a preference of whatever term you prefer to use.
Yeah.
People tend to use entheogen when they don't want it to be associated with the negative connotations of psychedelics or hallucinogens. And then you also do see a lot of people in like the academia world and in the science world starting to use entheogen, but that's a huge topic at hand in the psychedelic field is, what do you refer, how do you refer to a psychedelic? Is it a psychedelic, an entheogen? There's so many different words.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm curious. This question just came, but thinking about your rich lineage and your grandmother and all these really powerful women in your life, and thinking about how I believe that altered states used to be a part of a spiritual practice. They were a thing that people, especially with indigenous cultures, that were a thing that people experienced as rite of passage. And that has been somewhat missing in this culture, except for, festivals and things that had no ritual surrounding it. How do you feel? Do you feel that's returning, and that's why there's this surge of people that are interested in entheogens and altered states? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, so it's really evident that Western medicine has left spirit out of medicine for a really long time. And we're starting to see with a bunch of controlled studies, with meditation and with psychedelics, that spirit is a vital component in human healing.
Yeah.
And I think that is a huge push as to why we're starting to see this, because we're kind of forced to it. We're pushed naturally into it because we need it. We crave it as human beings. We crave this spirit connection, or connection to another human, or to ourselves, a higher consciousness. And it's really something that's, I think, newer to the Western world than it is to a lot of other cultures around the world. Like you were saying, and like in the Amazon, for example, they've been using psychedelics for spiritual and psychology development for who knows how long. I don't know how long. I'm sure somebody did, but and even in the Mexican culture with Aztecs, with people in different small towns that use magic mushrooms. You see it in old Greek cultures, old Roman cultures, but there are two anthropologists, Julie Brown and Jerry Brown, who are husband and wife, and they actually specifically research psychedelics in religious contexts.
Oh, wow.
And that means Catholicism, Buddhism. I mean, in every religion you can imagine, they kind of dive into whether or not people used to use psychedelics to connect to their higher God, or their higher energy. But
what were those findings? I bet they were overwhelmingly in support. I mean, I would think, like, if you can dig back historically enough, what were, do you know?
I actually don't know. I would highly recommend checking
out their work.
Their works out. Yeah.
Nice. Thanks for bringing up those names. I'll link to a lot of these resources that we're talking about.
Yes.
Okay.
I'll be throwing out a lot of names and organizations. So
nice. Perfect.
List.
Perfect. So let's go back to your experience with ayahuasca. Was that kind of what pushed you and propelled you into this path? Because I know that we connected through Third Wave, which I think you'll talk about a little bit later. Just wondering if that kind of pushed you over the edge, or if you had already been on this path when you had this amazing experience with ayahuasca.
So the Third Wave was actually my first stepping stone, my first real stepping stone into the field of psychedelics. And it was definitely a catalyst into this world, which was awesome, like a rush into this world, because Paul, who's the founder of the Third Wave, had been pushing this for a couple of years before I came on board, and was already getting some good traction, had just gotten an article in Rolling Stones. But the people that I was connected to during my time at the Third Wave and everything I was able to learn while I was there definitely gave me the courage and the inspiration to keep working in this field.
Nice. Will you tell everyone who's watching what the third, like, I was so impressed with the Third Wave for a lot of reasons. And I love it that you were a woman in that space. But can you tell us what the first wave, the second wave, and now what the third wave is of this medicine?
Yeah. So I remember you had mentioned that you loved the idea of knowing how the third wave was named. And this is actually exactly how it was named. There was a conversation between Paul and one of his buddies. And I don't know where they were, but they were talking one day and discussing the organization that Paul envisioned building and that he was already building. And I think it was his buddy, I don't remember exact details, but one of them was discussing that the first wave of psychedelics was the indigenous use of psychedelics. Second wave was the culture of the 60s and 70s, and that the third wave was upon us now. And that is how the third wave's name came to life.
I love it. I love it. And
Yeah.
you know that the third wave is very much about responsible use and bringing back that sacred part of it. That's what really caught
Yeah,
me.
absolutely. They do a lot of work with just making sure they connect with scientists, academia in the field, to bring people credible, valuable information. The content writer is currently finishing up his PhD in, I don't remember exactly in what, but in some type of medicine. I think it is psychedelic medicine. I should know. But no, yeah. I mean, the information that you're able to get from the Third Wave is really valuable, and I highly recommend people checking it out. It's thethirdwave.co, and they also have a course that you can take on microdosing that is extremely informative and just filled with a ton of solid information.
Sweet. We might touch back on the microdosing. I'd written it on my notes.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have your stepping stone, which gives you the courage to really be out in this field, and you have your ayahuasca experience. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So my ayahuasca experience was, I mean, it was incredible. This specific one that I'm referring to, I went to a medicine woman's home. And we did a one-on-one session. So I was specifically doing it as a therapy session. So I had been going to a psychologist before, for months beforehand, started preparing for the session, and then did the session with the medicine lady and kept going to a therapist afterwards. So one thing that I have to say before I continue this is that people should absolutely work with experts when they want to do this for therapy.
Yeah.
And MAPS, M-A-P-S, which is another organization I'll give you, they have a great list of therapists that do psychedelic integration work. But I went to the session and I walked into this lady's home, and it was just full of crystals, leather drums, unicorn paintings, Buddha paintings, Jesus paintings, Virgin Mary, like a little bit of everything. It was incredible, just amazing energy, feathers everywhere. And then this beautiful little corner with this comfortable two-sided couch and a rug and a throw-up bucket for me. And
Gotta
a
have that.
blindfold. Yeah. Blankets, crystals around there as well. And then we kind of just went into it. We took a walk before, actually came back, and then started the session. And she started with meditation. she handed me my first cup, which smells delicious, but tastes horrible. It's, yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Horrible. And I took the first cup, forced it down, and I was good. I didn't feel anything for maybe 20, 30 minutes. Slowly started feeling tingleness and like tingling. And then she gave me my second cup. I took that down, and the second I smelt it, it was just over. And I like started purging 5 times, one right after another, which is pretty much inevitable when doing ayahuasca for the most part. And then it didn't take long for ayahuasca to just knock me on my ass and completely put me down. And I just closed my eyes. I remember kind of going into a fearful feeling of like, whoa, this is really strong. And I vividly remember telling myself to breathe and to relax, and that I had chosen this and that it was going to be over at some point and I wouldn't be here forever. And with that, I was able to relax and kind of just allow myself to go in to whatever was taking over my visuals and my mind and my body. And it was one of the greatest experiences of my life. I mean, I was in contact with my family, both living and dead. I was able to talk to my great grandmother, my grandfather who had just passed, my dad's father. I kept seeing myself as an electromagnetic light being. And any time that I would question anything or start to doubt, my mind would just take me like really quickly back to this light being just floating there. And it was telling me something really specific, something along the lines of like, we just are. We just are. Like we, and that was just kept repeating over my entire journey. And I took that out with me. And I
love it. That's, you answered that in one of your questions. We just are.
We just are. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And I love that the link between psychology and mental health and doing this with a qualified person one-on-one. Not that group rituals aren't great, but I love that scene that you set up. And I love that is somewhat your platform, right?
Yeah. So with Letter Evolution, I'm actually working on, and I don't know if I'm going to keep that as the name. That's still in debate, but the project that I'm currently working on is at very, very beginning stages, and definitely more to come of it. But the main concept around it is that I would be sponsoring people from impoverished communities around the U.S. that have PTSD and drug addiction through a proper psychedelic program, whether it's 2 months or 3 months. I haven't quite figured that out yet, but it would be pre and post therapy in the US, and then the actual ceremony would be done in a country where it's legal.
Wow, that's beautiful. Let me know how I can support it all. And I'm sure if people are listening and they want to know how to support you, they can reach out to you, because I think that is a great mission and so very needed. Let me just look at my notes. I want to make sure that we're okay. So I'm curious if you know, because of working with the third wave and your own experience, even with things like microdosing, the link between spiritual, emotional healing and different plants. So, there's some people that are like using microdosing mushrooms for PTSD. Can you speak at all to different plant medicines and what they may be good for? Does that make sense?
Of course. So let's see, and I also had some notes here, but the really interesting thing with psychedelics is that with more studies coming out, we're starting to realize that a lot of these psychedelics work in very similar ways. So many psychedelics are actually really good for a lot of these mental issues across the board.
Yeah.
There are some that are better for others. For example, PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
MDMA is one of the ones that is really powerful for PTSD and is in phase 3 actually of controlled studies with the FDA and the DEA and MAPS, which is
Uh-huh.
the leading psychedelic research organization in the States. So we have for PTSD, MDMA and ayahuasca. We have, and I'm sure there's others, it's just that these two have been the main focus for PTSD.
Yeah.
For anxiety, we have LSD, psilocybin, which is the main ingredient in mushroom. For OCD, also psilocybin. For end of life treatment for cancer patients, there are a lot of controlled studies pointing to psilocybin also
Wow.
being a huge
That's
one.
beautiful.
Ibogaine is
Okay.
really, really good for drug addiction. Yeah, I mean, there's a whole mess of them, but the Third Wave actually is a really great resource for this. They have a page titled Psychedelics, and every single psychedelic, they have a little bar that says therapeutic use, and then they list different therapeutic uses and link to different studies. So that's a great way to kind of go in and check out which substance you're interested in and check what it's good for.
Which uses.
Yeah.
I love that. Thank you for that. What's it like being a woman in this space, and what do you see as, I don't know, I'll ask you the second part later, but women in this space, how do you feel about it? What's that like? You know, every time I'm looking for, my introduction to psychedelics happened when I was 33. And so for the last 5 years or so, I've just been diving into all the information I can get. And anytime I'm looking for anything, it's mostly through the lens of a man, which is totally fine, you know, but I'm excited about women in this space. So I'm curious how you feel about that.
Yeah. So let's see. Women, I mean, there already are a lot of really incredible, intelligent women in this space. We have Bia Labate, for example, who's one of the leading anthropologists in psychedelic research, knows a ton about ayahuasca. We have Julie Holland, who's a psychopharmacologist and a psychiatrist.
Nice.
She's based out of New York and also does a bunch of work in this field. I mean, I can list a whole mess of women.
Good. I want to talk to all these women. So I'm curious too, mostly, because I mean, I've found little resources here and there, but I've really come up with not much, but I'm glad that there are.
And you're right. I mean, the field is definitely, and most fields are still dominated by men. And I think that's a change that is going to happen over time that will hopefully become a little bit more equalized, not only in this field, but in all fields. But with this field specifically, I get really excited with women because I tend to feel like women are very intuitive and drawn to being more emotional and spiritual than men are. Not that men aren't, just that, you know, usually you meet more women than men that want to sit down and talk about their feelings.
Yeah, exactly.
And women do have this natural motherly like intuition and gut feeling, and I think that's a really powerful thing to have and to couple with psychedelics, something that's taking you to a non-ordinary state of consciousness.
And I also feel like more women would be open to being with different types of plant medicine. So when I started this journey, I had a similar eye experience where I just was like, it was one of the best experiences of my life. And I was telling all my friends and they thought I was crazy, mostly my girlfriends. And, you know, and I'm not trying to talk anyone into doing anything. I'm just like presenting my experience and being like, if you want help with facilitating any of this, I feel connected in that world now. So like use me as a resource, but like no one's taking me up on it. And I just find that a lot of the circles I go to are mainly men. And so it just seems like women are a bit slower to, and I don't know if you're finding this at all, a bit slower to open to it. And I feel like if there's more women leading out, that other women would be more inclined to have the experience.
Yeah, I can definitely see that that being true in a lot of senses. I mean, obviously this is being used in a very therapeutic context, and it is very vulnerable for women to kind of walk into a male dominated field and kind of taking on doing therapy with a pretty strong substance. But at the same time, the sense that I get with people in this field, and especially the men that I've come across, people are extremely open and very friendly. And I don't know if it's the fact that everybody in this field has done psychedelics in a therapeutic sense, and they have dissolved certain egos, but everybody that I've come across is willing to lend a helping hand, to give direction. And I mean, I'm talking about people that I get starstruck by in this field, like Dennis McKenna, for example, who's one of the leading ethnobotanists of the world, an author. He probably has a lot of other credentials that I'm not listing, but he's brother of Terrence McKenna, came out of, I think, Harvard or Columbia. But I mean, they're all extremely helpful and just want to get knowledge out there. And to me, it doesn't seem like very many people care about being in this limelight or their egos as much as a lot of other fields.
I could see how that would be true. And thank you for, just pulling out the other side of that coin. What do you feel like is the future of psychedelics? I know that may be a big question, but what do you see as like on the horizon? What's possible for us? I know a lot of this work is like destigmatizing things and
I'm really optimistic about the future of psychedelics. And I think that's mainly because we have a lot of controlled studies being done now, and the FDA and the DEA starting to work with organizations like MAPS to actually push these studies through. I do think that the change is going to come a lot slower than people want it to come because of the fact that it takes a lot of money to do these controlled studies, a lot, and it takes a lot of time. And Rick Doblin, for example, he's the leader of MAPS, and he's the one who's leading the MDMA studies with the FDA and the DEA. He has stated several times that, I mean, one phase alone, and there's 3 phases in making a substance legal with the FDA and the DEA. One phase can take several years to complete. And there are 3 phases that any medication has to pass through in order to become legal. So it's, I think it's going to be a slow process, but it's also pretty incredible to see how much people are taking this into their own hands, because most of the time people can, get a psychedelic if they really want to, and also get information, because we're in the tech world now and we have information at our fingertips and knowledge at our fingertips. And if that's the direction that somebody chooses to take, again, I highly recommend that you still work with a expert, whether that be a therapist, a medicine person, but don't try to do that on your own.
I so much agree. Thank you for saying that, especially the piece about taking it into your own hands, and not in a reckless way, because I'm all about mindfulness and really moving this information forward in that way. But there is no excuse. There's a ton of information. And so what advice would you give to someone who has never tried plant medicine but may want to try? Like what's the first step?
Yeah, I would say educating yourself on what it is that, one, why do you want to take it? Be clear on your intentions. That's really important. I would say intentions are always a good idea when going into a psychedelic session for therapy specifically, because with my experience with ayahuasca, you're really able to, even though you're kind of thrown into this magic world, you're still able to control your thoughts and your intentions, and you're able to draw back onto the reasons why you did this in the first place. So having an intention set will help you work and process through things during a session.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's
now I'm
great.
forgetting what
No,
question.
I have one, and it's like, so just like a tip. It's like, to me,
A
like,
tip, yeah.
don't do whatever you want. But sometimes watching these like YouTube clips, these terrible things, I would say avoid that. When I was going down, I felt called a long time before I said yes to the call. I remember reading a book with Sting, and I think I was early 20s, and I was like, oh, wow, ayahuasca. Like, I just bookmarked that experience. And when it came back around, I was definitely much older, but I was like, I want to educate myself in a way that's helpful, not harmful. So, I looked to experts and people who had experiences, because I didn't want to fuel the side of myself who is afraid of the unknown. Like, we all are. And that's a big part of being in that psychedelic magical world, is trusting yourself in this totally unknown place. So just,
and you just said it. That's the biggest thing, is trusting yourself. So it's a really personal decision whether you want to take psychedelics or not for therapy. And it's not for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to do it, do the research. I mean, there's organizations that you should definitely look into. Again, I will give you the list, but there's MAPS, ICERS, Beckley Foundation, Imperial College, Hefter Institute. I mean, and all of these organizations are led by the leading psychiatrists, leading neuroscientists, leading pharmacologists of the world, et cetera. I mean, and people who are coming from the top colleges around the world.
Yeah.
Really well-educated people who have been pushing this research and these agendas since the 60s, 70s.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's really, really incredible to see, but definitely do the research. And again, I will give you all this information to list for people to take a look at.
Nice, thank you.
Yeah.
So there's one question that I'm asking everyone that's the same. I'm not sure if there's anything that you didn't get to say that you really felt was lingering in this conversation. I'll give you a chance to think about that. But the question that I'm asking, and sometimes people are like, I need more information, but the question is, what happens when you, and by you I mean us, what happens when we refuse to play by the rules? And so in this case, it could be by, the rules that were set up about these plants. A lot of them have been demonized. Just what happens when we refuse to play by those rules?
I mean, I think that we start to break our own mentally institutionalized systems, and that is what allows us to reach a deeper level of connection with our own self, with our own consciousness, and understand not only our worldviews, but ourselves and our beliefs a lot better. And one thing that I find that tends to happen is through life generally, we become conditioned. We have daily routines, we have rhythms, and this is really what kind of gets us stuck in these institutionalized systems of thinking and behavior. And when we break those systems, we actually break a lot of the most underlying components of mental health issues like depression or anxiety, and it doesn't matter what level it's at. It could be a smidge of depression that you had for half a day, or somebody who deals with chronic depression. But when you're able to actually start tapping into the freedom of your own thoughts, then I think that's what tends to happen, is your own beliefs and your own views become expanded when you don't follow the rules.
That is so well said. If it gets really loud, there's a train going by. I don't think it'll be too loud, but yeah, I love that. Getting in touch with your own thoughts. And that was a big catalyst for why I wanted to create this. I wanted to have a bunch of people on who have diverse stories and opinions about different things that I feel help make people wild, which is just like that freedom that you have to tap into what's real for you outside of narratives, outside of what you're supposed to be doing, and really living from that place of truth. And so I think that you are a shining example of that. I'm so glad that you're in this space. I'm so glad that we got to have this conversation and get connected. And thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you too.
we can cut back in, and I got a little excited about not ending this, but I didn't give Angela a chance to just chime in a little bit deeper about the connection of spirituality and psychology and healing with these sacred plants.
Yeah, so really I could sit here and talk to you about this for hours, which is probably why I felt the need to come in and say this, but yeah, there's just a few other things that I wanted to add for whoever is listening, but spirituality and psychology are super fun topics to discuss with psychedelics, specifically because we're seeing that there's a connection between them a lot more than we knew of currently. But Roland Griffiths, who's a professor in the Department of Psychiatry and Neuroscience at Johns Hopkins University, found that through his controlled study experiments that he's done with psychedelics, he found that 60% of people have what is called a mystical transcendence experience, and that these experiences lead usually to permanent life-changing experiences. And especially in spiritual life, no matter what religion you practice. And that's pretty incredible because, like we were talking about before we took this little break, there's levels upon levels of perspectives in the world. And we tend to forget this because of the conditioning that I was talking about. And the really interesting thing is that when our thoughts and behaviors become so rigid, and that usually happens as we get older, these are the underlying components of mental health issues like depression. And this is actually what's going on in our brains. So the moment we're actually able to break free of those patterns, we're able to change the way our brain and our mind works. And we're actually able to change genetic structure, which is the incredible part. So we're able to use the power of our mind to change that genetic structure. Mm-hmm. And what psychedelics do is they actually inactivate learned repetitive thought patterns and behavior. And this is one of the most exciting things for me in this whole field. But there's something really powerful about experiencing ourselves as electromagnetic light beings and experiencing ourselves as part of the universe, connecting to rocks, rivers, sky, etc. And there's a shift that happens within us with that. And not only in life, but really in the power, like I said, of our mind and being able to actually change genetic structure. One of the big things there is brain imaging studies, which we've just recently been able to do because we now have the technology. But Amanda Fielding, who's the leader of the Beckley Foundation in London that does a lot of psychedelic research, she did the first brain imaging study with LSD back in 2016. And what she found was that psychedelics, LSD specifically, but the thought is that this also works really similarly with other psychedelics, but it specifically works with what's called the default mode network in your brain, the DMN. And the default mode network is in charge of what gets processed through to your consciousness and what gets repressed. So whatever's getting repressed, that's usually where, your traumas go, where anxiety goes, where a lot of debilitating things go, is the repressed part of this default mode network. And what psychedelics do is they work specifically with what's called the serotonin 5-HT2A receptor. And that specific receptor, when it's so the 5-HT2A receptor is connected to the part of your brain that is in control of your emotions, like anger, hunger, sex drive, mood, etc. And every place in the brain that's involved in cognition, And consciousness is directly or indirectly affected when psychedelics stimulate these serotonin 2A receptors. So what that means is that the brain is actually starting to communicate all together. And in our daily lives, there's only parts of our brain that are communicating with one another. What the brain imaging study was able to show was that psychedelics, LSD specifically, actually reduce the blood supply to the default mode network. When the blood supply is reduced, this actually reduces the repressing function of the default mode network. And it lights up pretty much your entire brain, and it allows your entire brain to communicate in a way that you don't communicate on a normal basis. So you're able to process a lot of these traumas that have been repressed, or anxiety-ridden things that have been repressed, etc. And that is just, that's an incredible stepping stone and breaking of the ceiling in psychiatry. And it's a science that I think we know very little about, the brain and the gut, probably two of the organs we know least about in the body, in the human body. And this is definitely a huge, huge step in a direction of healing, massive healing for a lot of people worldwide. So yeah, with that, I kind of wanted to end with a quote by the Dalai Lama in a book that he wrote called The Universe in a Single Atom. And it is a quote that kind of does combine consciousness and the study of consciousness, where we are, and indigenous traditions of studying your consciousness.
So sorry.
I was just about to end with a Dalai Lama quote, but I had finished everything else.
Okay.
Yeah, hopefully it's people are able to understand what I'm trying to say. If it's not clear.
No, it was super articulate, and the fact that this research is going on is amazing. And yeah, so take it away. End it however you'd like with the quote. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties today.
No, don't worry about it. Yeah, so this is a quote from the Dalai Lama from a book that he wrote called The Universe in a Single Atom. And it brings the topic of consciousness, the study of consciousness, and the way that old Eastern traditions have used consciousness in the past. But he says, in order for the study of consciousness to be complete, we need a methodology that would account not only for what is occurring at the neurological and biochemical levels, but also for the subjective experience of consciousness itself. Even when combined, neuroscience and behavioral psychology do not shed enough light on the subjective experience, as both approaches still place primary importance on the object, third-person perspective. Contemplative traditions on the whole have historically emphasized subjective, first-person investigation of the nature of functions of consciousness by training the mind to focus in a disciplined way on its own internal states.
That's beautiful.
That's a big one, but yeah.
No, it is. That experiential journey. I love that. So thank you so much for putting up with all the snafus and for being such a wise, wonderful woman. I'm really excited about people getting access to this information. And I'll tell people how they can find you. Do you have a website up?
So my website is actually quite stagnant, but it's working. There's just a one-pager though. There's not really, you can email me if you want to get in touch with me from there. It's letterevolution.com. And the website is meant to be as it is, with very little information, just because of the kinds of people that I would be helping and dealing with. But please feel free to reach out to me via email if you'd like to get in touch.
Nice. Thank you so much, Angela. Thank you for being a part of the symposium.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. Loved having this conversation with you.
Thank you. Bye, everybody. Sorry you can't see me.